The National Guardsman who survived last week's shooting in Washington, D.C. is showing signs of improvement. West Virginia Governor Patrick Morrisey provided an update on his condition this afternoon.
Andrew remains in serious condition. We did have some positive news that we were told that Andrew was asked if he could hear the nurse who asked the question to give a thumbs up, and he did respond. And we were told that he also wiggled his toes. So we take that as a positive sign.
Fellow Guardsman Sarah Beckstrom was killed in Wednesday's shooting. During a vigil on Saturday, Morrissey said of the 20-year-old, quote, "She had a lot of kindness and certainly had courage." President Trump has invited the parents of both Guardsmen to the White House. The 29-year-old Afghan national faces 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of assault with intent to kill. In response to the attack, the Trump administration has halted all asylum decisions and paused visas for travelers with Afghan passports. The White House promises action following the tragic shooting in Washington, D.C. last week, targeting 2 National Guard members. U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolfe is still fighting for his life, while Army Specialist Sarah Beckstrom unfortunately lost hers.
Sarah and Andrew are heroes, and we will never forget their sacrifice. That means ensuring the monster responsible for this atrocity is prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and faces the most severe punishment possible. It also means reckoning with why this atrocity was allowed to happen in the first place, so that it may never occur again.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the shooting was a consequence of President Biden's botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. She said President Trump is now actively re-examining all Afghans brought into the country under Biden, and any individual who threatens U.S. national security or Americans will be deported. She added that the Trump administration will also end fraud committed by false asylum seekers. The White House also responded to scrutiny over strikes on Venezuelan drug boats.
President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have made it clear that presidentially designated narco-terrorist groups are subject to lethal targeting in accordance with the laws of war. With respect to the strikes in question on September 2nd, Secretary Hegseth authorized Admiral Bradley to conduct these kinetic strikes. Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the United States of America was eliminated.
The White House defended the second strikes, saying the military is justified in doing so because the administration has designated narco-terrorists as foreign terrorist organizations. Leavitt announced that Trump is meeting with his national security team on this subject today. On the Russia-Ukraine war, the White House said it's very optimistic about a peace deal. The White House also teased the president's schedule this week. It includes a cabinet meeting, the announcement of new savings accounts, the signing of a peace deal between Rwanda and Congo, and the lighting of the national Christmas tree. And has more on that, plus reactions from Attorney General Pam Bondi and DHS Secretary Kristi Noem.
President Trump told reporters yesterday that his administration could pause asylum admissions for an extended period.
No time limit, but it could be a long time.
Trump was referring to the 19 nations his administration designates as countries of identified concern when asked which nationals might face asylum restrictions.
Let me just tell you something. We don't want those people. Does that make sense? You know why we don't want them? Because many have been no good, and they shouldn't be in our country.
What do you mean by those people? Can you
The
clarify?
people from different countries that are not friendly to us and countries that are out of control themselves.
The president also addressed his earlier comments about possibly revoking citizenship from individuals who already obtained it.
We have criminals that came into our country and they were naturalized maybe through a Biden or somebody that didn't know what they were doing. If I have the power to do it, I'm not sure that I do, but if I do, I would denaturalize absolutely.
His remarks come after Citizenship and Immigration Services halted all asylum decisions until it says it can ensure that every immigrant is vetted to the maximum degree possible. Attorney General Pam Bondi criticized the vetting of arrivals under the Operation Allies Welcome program, the pathway used by the Afghan suspect in the D.C. shooting, speaking on Fox News.
They did not do biometrics. They did not do social media. They did very little, if minimal, vetting on all of these people. And now to take a step back, we have a 1.5 million backlog of people that have come into our country.
Bondi says radicalization is happening inside the U.S. as well.
We know that this shooter who shot our National Guardsman in D.C. the day before Thanksgiving, he was radicalized. You're going to hear a lot more about that. And these people should not have been in our country.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was asked why the suspect, who previously served in a CIA-trained strike force, was not fully vetted. Although he entered the U.S. in 2021, he wasn't granted asylum until April of this year, speaking on NBC News.
The vetting process, Kristen, happens when the person comes into the country, and Joe Biden completely did not vet any of these individuals, did not vet this individual, waited until he got into the United States, and then that application for asylum was opened under the Joe Biden administration when he was the president in the White House and allowed that to go forward with the information that they provided. That's the Biden administration's responsibility.
President Trump says he plans to honor the 2 National Guard members shot in Washington and that he has invited their parents to the White House.
I've already suggested it. I said, when you're ready, because that's a tough thing, come to the White House, we're going to honor Sarah. And likewise with Andrew, recover or not, we're going to honor her.
West Virginia National Guard members Sarah Beckstrom and Andrew Wolfe were shot in an alleged ambush the day before Thanksgiving. Beckstrom died the next day from her injuries. Wolfe remains in critical condition. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services said it halted all asylum decisions. Joining us to discuss is Mark Lamb, a former Pinal County sheriff and current congressional candidate. And we have Robin Byro, a U.S. Army Ranger veteran and Democratic strategist who previously served as an Obama regional campaign director. First of all, thank you both for joining us today. And I'll start with you, Robin. President Trump recently commented on pausing immigration from certain countries for a very long time. In your view, is this an effective way to protect the American people and society?
I actually don't have a problem with him pausing asylum, Don, because he's got the right to do so as commander-in-chief. And look, I'll be intellectually honest with you here. This person did come over under the Biden administration, but I want to be clear here that they served in the Afghan Special Forces who were trained by the CIA, and that's why he later applied for asylum under the Trump administration and received asylum. So, you know, we've got somewhere a failure here. I'm not exactly sure where that is, but I think it's smart actually to pause asylum and look at where the failure was and pause it till we have more information, Don.
So, Mark, can I get where you stand on this issue, pausing asylum, pausing immigration from third world countries? Yeah.
Look, I'm 100% in favor of this. While we may not know exactly how this guy achieved his asylum, if it was under President Trump, came under President Biden, what his status was when he was helping, or if he was the U.S. military. The fact is we had a ton of people, millions of people that came in virtually unvetted and unvetted over the last 4 years under the Biden administration. We saw it firsthand in Arizona. There was people coming from all over the world. They were coming by the thousands a day. There was no possible way for them to vet them. So I absolutely think that we need to do this. Look, how many military lives do we need to lose before we make hard decisions? I love that President Trump, as the commander-in-chief, says 2 is too many. We are going to put a stop to this. We are going to make sure that anybody who claims asylum in this country has been properly vetted.
So, Robin, do you agree with that? Do you think the U.S. should improve its vetting process dramatically?
Probably so, but let's be clear. This person was vetted twice, first under the Biden administration and then again under the Trump administration when he applied for political asylum. And it's a pretty stringent process, especially under this administration, to apply for political asylum. But what we know of this individual, Mr. Lakenwall, is that he spun out of control. He lost his job. Things were going really well, according to his caseworker, but he lost his job. Things went really bad. And then he locked himself in a bedroom and didn't come out for 2 years. That should have been a red flag right there for the caseworker. And I know that they did notify that something was wrong, but come on, they had to have known that something definitely was wrong with this individual mental health wise.
So, Mark, what is your response to that this individual was vetted during the Biden administration and during the Trump administration?
Well, I think what we keep doing is we keep going back to a single individual, but let's look at it as a broader picture. In April, we had an Afghan guy, that same situation, who pulled a gun and shot at police. They ended up getting into a police shootout on a traffic stop. We most recently had a guy that was alleged of planning a bombing. These are not isolated incidences, and I don't think we should just focus on this one particular guy. As a whole, we need to look at it and say the system has been broken for 4 years. It needs to be revamped. It needs to be fixed. And there's the amount of removals for asylum claims is as high as 97% in many of the courts. And so a lot of these asylum claims are false in the first place. So let's get beyond this one guy. I know this is the tragic incident we're focused on, but I think we need to be looking at it. And this is what President Trump is doing, is saying we better revamp this and take a look at it on a much larger scale, because this is not an isolated incident. He is not the first person that came to this country under an asylum claim who has committed violence against American citizens, military, or police.
Okay, Robin, what do you say to that?
There's a mental health problem. My co-panelist here is exactly right. And like I said, I don't have a problem with pausing asylum. And a lot of these people, I really do think, especially if they came from places like Afghanistan, I served there, right? I did a couple tours there. And this was an Afghan national who we trained in the Afghan Special Forces. He saw hard combat. One of his best friend actually died while seeking asylum here in the United States. So, he was under significant mental duress. We've got a mental health crisis right now in our country, and that's why, as my co-panelist Mark said, look at the bigger picture. These shootings tend to happen by people who are in duress as far as mental health is concerned.
Mark, where do you stand on the level of immigration the United States should have? Do you think the U.S. should have at least a base level of immigration?
Well, I think first of all, I'd like to say what Robin talked about, the mental health piece of this. Not only do we have mental health from people that have come from countries we really don't know anything about them, we have a mental health crisis in America as well that we've got to get on top of. So we need to reduce this problem down as much as possible so we can focus on Americans first. Then we can start to deal with other problems throughout the world. But I think Americans in this country want to see us deal with Americans first and foremost. So I think the amount of immigration, we already have a legal channel. What I'm not okay with is I think the amount should be zero illegal immigration into this country. And that is the problem that President Trump is having to fix. Let's not be angry at President Trump for the decisions he has to make today, because of decisions, poor decisions that were made under the Biden administration for 4 years. Now the guy that has to clean it up is shouldering the anger that is oftentimes we see in our communities, but it comes from the result of the actions of the Biden administration, Mayorkas, Harris. These are the folks that are responsible for a lot of this. Now we've got to fix it. Let's not be angry with the person that actually has the stones to fix what was created by the Biden administration.
So, Robin, earlier you talked about a mental health crisis situation in the nation. I'm wondering if social media and the media has had a role to play, in this tragic incident where these two National Guardsmen were shot.
It's hard to tell in this one specific instance, because this gentleman literally locked himself in a dark room for nearly 2 years. So who knows what he was consuming as far as media goes or social media. I have a feeling he just kind of checked out and removed himself from society. But we know that he lost his job. Things just spiraled out of control. He had a family to feed. Like I said, things were going well at one point in time, but what I want the viewers to understand is that if you know somebody personally in your sphere of influence who suddenly, is doing well, and then 1 minute loses their job or checks out of society, you haven't heard from them in a while, you need to check on that person, because that's what happens, especially with men. Men put huge priority on their jobs. When they lose a job, they feel like a failure, an abject failure to their families, particularly if they come from other countries and if they're the head of household. So, make sure that you follow up with people that you haven't heard from in a while.
Okay, Mark, why do you think we've seen such a dramatic increase in violence against law enforcement, whether we're talking about National Guard or ICE?
Our politicians in the media, they continue to go out and say reckless things like calling ICE the Gestapo, or talking about our military, the efforts that we saw in Washington, D.C. to curtail crime under the bad policies of Democrats in those areas. We're seeing it in Portland. We're seeing it in so many areas. And then we have politicians that go on and they encourage us and they inflame this type of rhetoric and behavior. We shouldn't be surprised when we see it play out on the streets of America, where people go against our law enforcement or our military for merely doing the job that Congress has set forth. And so I think that is one of the biggest pieces of it. It's only amplified. You bring up social media. It's only amplified on social media, where people are constantly driving a wedge amongst us as Americans. We need to get back to being Americans first. Whether we agree politically or not, we all have a common interest, which is the betterment of this country. And the problem with a lot of the folks that have been brought here under asylum or refugee status is they continue to maintain allegiance for the countries that they came from. And we need people that have an allegiance to this country, to America, who want to see it succeed. I think all of us are sick and tired of seeing people come here and fly some other country's flag because they didn't. If you don't like it here, you are welcome to leave at any time. That is the beauty of living in America. But I think that our politicians and our media have only amplified this and thrown gas on the fire, and it has been reckless and dangerous for law enforcement and military.
Okay, Robin, I want you to respond to that, but I also want to ask you, because we played a clip earlier before this interview of President Trump saying if he had the power to denaturalize, he would absolutely use that power for criminals, of course, who came to the U.S. Can you just comment on that as well? Where do you stand?
For criminals, sure. Naturalization is a constitutional right, though, so that's where things get touchy. I'm no constitutional law professor, but I know enough about it to know that there are implications as far as that goes constitutionally. But look, like I said, he's the commander-in-chief. He's got the right to make decisions based on the people who voted for him. But I want to make a point. He represents all of the country, not just the people who voted for him. But he did win based off of his campaign promises. And one of those, Don, make no mistake, was tightening up immigration. And I acknowledge the fact. My co-panelist Mark is right. There was a problem under the Biden administration. I myself was blind to it for a long time. I thought literally when my friends on the left were saying that that's just a Republican talking point, that was true, and I dismissed the concerns. And then I was horrified when I actually found out the truth, that the border really was practically wide open under the Biden administration. And that is a huge problem. And it's probably why we're having issues today to clean that up.
Okay, can I ask you the same question, Mark, about what Trump said about denaturalizing?
Look, I think American citizenship for some people that have come here and have gained citizenship through a green card process or something else is a privilege. And I like Robin, I'm not the constitutional authority either, but I also think that there should be some sense of accountability if you come here and you do something against our country. I'm not okay with that. Look, and I think a lot of Americans are not okay with that. That's something we're going to have to take a look at. I'm running for the U.S. Congress because I hope to be part of the solution in fixing a lot of these problems with immigration. I think we've had problems that have been avoided for decades for political reasons. They've avoided fixing these, and I want to get in there and fix them. We can't keep putting executive orders on it. While I agree with the executive orders that President Trump has put on, I think it has actually stopped the bleeding as it relates to the border and immigration. We've got to do a lot more. And now we need Congress to make these things law and make a good immigration process. so we don't continue to have these problems long term. But I am all for protecting America and Americans. I think that is what Americans expect from their elected officials. And I think that's what not only I expect Washington to focus on, but when I get to Washington, D.C., I'll be focused on Americans as well.
Okay, Robin, how do you think we can improve this immigration system that we have in the United States?
What Mark just said is very true about the executive orders. Those are great, but they're just a temporary solution because the next administration, whoever wins an election next, can undo them basically on day one. So we need actual foundational repairs here to the immigration system. It has been broken for quite a long time. We've got to root it out.
Okay, Mark, we got to wrap up here. If you have any final thoughts, please go ahead.
Well, no, I think what Robin has said is, and that's why I think that it's important that we get people that understand we've got a lot of problems to fix. We're not going to fix these overnight. But I think that President Trump is doing what is necessary. Look, as a leader, I was a sheriff for 8 years. I was expected to make the tough decisions, even when it wasn't popular. But it was what was right to protect my people and their constitutional rights and their American way of life. President Trump has shown that he is willing to do that. And I get that a lot of Americans may or may not like it. But like Robin has eloquently put, he is the commander in chief. He is the executive of this country. He gets to make those decisions. And I think he has been well within his authority as a president to do so. And while Congress has rendered itself ineffective over the last several decades, what should be the most powerful branch of government has abdicated their duties to the judicial branch and the executive branch. In that environment, I'm glad to see President Trump making the tough decisions and doing what's necessary to protect Americans and the American way of life.
Well, all right. Great conversation today. Thank you both for joining us. Mark, Robin, pleasure.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Robin.
Now, tensions between the United States and Venezuela are escalating. President Trump says he spoke with President Nicolas Maduro, while U.S. lawmakers demand answers on alleged follow-up strikes in the Caribbean. Here's more.
President Trump confirmed yesterday he had a phone call with Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro as Washington intensifies military and diplomatic pressure on Caracas.
The New York Times reported that you had a phone call with Maduro. Did you?
I don't want to comment on it. The answer is yes.
And can you tell us a little bit
No,
about
I can't do that.
Mr. President, would you say it went well?
I wouldn't say it went well or badly. It was a phone call.
The news comes as the Trump administration closes Venezuelan airspace, warning airlines and pilots and drug dealers and human traffickers to avoid the region.
Mr. President, on Venezuela, can you tell us more about why the airspace above Venezuela should be considered closed?
Because we consider Venezuela to be not a very friendly country. They sent millions of people, really, and probably a number in excess of that. And a lot of those people shouldn't be in our country, from jails, from gangs, from drug dealers.
The Federal Aviation Administration earlier this month warned airlines of heightened military activity in the region, sparking several canceled flights to Venezuela.
Does your warning mean that an airstrike is imminent, or should we not read it that way?
Don't read anything into it.
Tensions have surged following more than 20 U.S. strikes on alleged drug smuggling boats since September. The administration says these operations have killed more than 80 people designated as narco-terrorists. But lawmakers from both parties are now demanding answers after reports that U.S. forces carried out a follow-up strike on survivors of an attack in September. War Secretary Pete Hegseth has denied ordering any follow-up strikes, calling reports fabricated and inflammatory.
I don't know anything about it. He said he did not say that, and I believe him 100%.
You don't know if there was
You're talking about the two men?
The second strike to kill the two men.
No, he said he didn't do it. He said he never said it.
Venezuela is now accusing the U.S. of murder, acknowledging for the first time that some of the dead were Venezuelan nationals. In Caracas yesterday, Maduro re-emerged in public for the first time in days. He appeared at an annual specialty coffee awards event and avoided any direct mention of the crisis. The unusually highly public president has not been seen for days, leading to speculation about his whereabouts.
President Trump announcing the airspace around Venezuela should be considered closed. Joining us to discuss is Jonathan Houlihan. He's a commander in the U.S. Navy's Judge Advocate General's Corps Reserves. He's a veteran of both the Iraq and Afghanistan combat theaters and a designated expert in international national security and operational law. So, Jonathan, always great to have you join us. I just have to ask you this. Does the United States have the legal authority to declare another sovereign nation's airspace closed?
Well, I think it's, first of all, anything I say on the program doesn't reflect the DoD or it's in my personal capacity, so based on my previous experience. But yeah, to declare that airspace closed, it's really more of a deconfliction matter, and there's increased operations, obviously, in the airspace. There may be more intelligence gathering activities, more military planes, so it's really a deconflicting of the airspace. So it's normal whenever countries are deconflicting airspace for increased operations.
And you know, Jonathan, FBI Director Kash Patel also talked about this topic. I actually have a clip from an interview that we did, our sister media did, the Epoch Times. Can you take a look at this?
The drug trafficking organizations, say down in Mexico and Colombia and Venezuela and elsewhere, are doing, the guys that are making the fentanyl. We know where they are, we know who they are, we know how they do it.
So it seems like the U.S. knows a lot about the drug operations in Venezuela. Can you just talk about, in your perspective, how do you see potential strikes playing out?
Well, I think they've laid the roadmap publicly, right? You have the FTO designation, Foreign Terrorist Organization designation, through the State Department. So that allows you to not only sanction and for financial issues and sanction individuals, but also to conduct military strikes on those designated narco-terrorists. So for that specific designation, it's going to be more based on status-based on those individuals, based on the intelligence they have that link those individuals to that FTO designation and the narco-terrorism activities.
And of course, Trump said there could be land action in Venezuela, right? What is the legal criteria for conducting military operations inside another sovereign country?
Well, certainly there's going to be, that would be more in the classified space. You're going to have the president dealing with, it probably would be other agencies that would deal with that. There'd be a presidential finding, whatnot. And that would be very, operations that wouldn't be so public. So in that context, if there were ground operations, it'd be very surgical. It would be very succinct. But I would assume a lot of it would be, targets with airstrikes with maybe a very small contingent force. Again, I don't know if that's actually going to occur. If that would occur, I don't have any intelligence to suggest that. It could be just posturing as well to let them know, the Venezuelans know, hey, we're serious about this cartel threat, this FTO threat, the narco-terrorists that reside in your country, that are conducting operations that are affecting the American public, and it's coming across our border. Fentanyl, as you said, I mean, it's killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. It's a very deadly synthetic opioid that has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans in an open border. So they've closed the border. Now there's the maritime threat. They're addressing that maritime threat. And if they're not able to address the maritime threat, they're going to seek to strike targets, their infrastructure, their command and control nodes within Venezuela.
I mean, Jonathan, are we in uncharted territory here? Has there been a precedent for U.S. actions such as this, whether we're talking about, drug boat strikes, military buildup, or potential land action?
Well, I mean, if you look at the Obama years, you had strikes all over. You had them all over the Middle East, drone strikes that were in sovereign nations based on status-based targets, whether they're Al-Qaeda or other ISIS-affiliated terrorist organizations. Yeah, there's certainly precedent for this. They called them the drone wars back in the day. It was when the strikes started getting approved in third countries. It was outside of the traditional battle space. And look, let's look at this realistically. This is not traditional warfare. This is not armed conflict with uniformed nations. This is non-international armed conflict with belligerents that have taken up arms or otherwise conducted military activity, narco-terrorist activity against the United States. So there is a precedent for this. It's just not what your listeners need to understand is that the same lines of effort that go with the terrorist activities are also with the drug trade, the narco-terrorist activities, human smuggling, human trafficking. All of these lines of effort are similar. So just because it's not an Al-Qaeda affiliated group taking up arms against the United States doesn't mean it's not a clear and present danger or threat to the United States, our population, our citizens, or our property. So President Trump has a duty and a responsibility as commander-in-chief under Article 2 to conduct military operations to protect the American people. Now, I understand Congress has a role. Congress is going to do what Congress does. They're going to provide oversight. But at the end of the day, the president has to strike when American lives are at risk. So it's the burden of command, the burden of being the president, the burden of being commander in chief is to take these things serious and strike and make sure American lives are protected. So yes, there's precedent in the Middle East, and now there's precedent in the Caribbean. And if they take that step further and strike within designated FTO targets within Venezuela, I'm sure there's going to be demarche actions. There's going to be all sorts of diplomatic issues that go up to the UN. But at the end of the day, the United States has an inherent right of self-defense, and that includes persons, property, and our citizens.
Okay, Jonathan, I just have one more thing I'm wondering here. And you brought up Al-Qaeda, which is a terrorist organization. And the Trump administration last week formally designated Maduro and his allies of his government as members of a foreign terrorist organization. So I'm wondering, what tools does this open up? Could this move give the U.S. expanded military options for striking inside Venezuela, for example?
Well, it opens up several tools. Like I said, a lot of the tools are designed for sanctions, to sanction that activity. We've done that in Russia. We've done it across the Middle East. We've done it in Iran. We've sanctioned banks. We've sanctioned financial institutions that have done business. You've heard about these snapback sanctions, where anybody that does third-party sanctions, anybody that does business with them. So it could open up a whole toolkit of financial incentives for those that do business in Venezuela not to do business in Venezuela. It also makes them targetable. It makes them status-based targets if the president or the chain of command authorizes those strikes. So it opens up that toolkit. It also opens up something that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, but if they're designated as FTOs and you're smuggling drugs, now you can be prosecuted under the material support statute. If you're providing support to these networks, you can now be prosecuted under 18 USC section 223B, I think it is, the Bravo section. So it opens up also a way to prosecute people. So it opens up multiple tools through diplomacy, financial means, through sanctions, through the Department of Treasury, through the military, and also through the Department of Justice. So it really is a whole of government approach to stop this narco-terrorist activity.
Well, all right. Great insight, Jonathan, today. Always great to speak with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Appreciate it.
In Honduras, the candidate backed by President Trump is in the lead in the country's presidential election. Nasri Asfora holds 40% of the vote, while his closest contender is at about 39.78%. Votes are still being counted. The next president is set to rule from 2026 through 2030. On social media, President Trump has said he supports Asfora. He said he can work with him to counter drug trafficking. Trump also threatened to pull U.S. funding if Asfora doesn't win. Republican lawmakers back President Trump's actions against narco-terrorists in the Western Hemisphere as tensions with the Venezuelan regime increase. Our Washington correspondent, Luis Eduardo Martinez, has more.
Nicolás Maduro, the leader of the cartel of the Suns and of the Venezuelan regime, appeared in public over the weekend after rumors that he had fled the country amid tensions with the United States.
Les pido estar siempre. I ask you to remain steadfast in your serenity. Be alert, ready, and willing to defend our rights as a nation. If history demands that we declare ourselves a republic in arms, history will once again see us rise up.
President Trump confirmed he held a phone conversation with Nicolás Maduro ahead of potential land strikes on Venezuelan soil.
The New York Times reported that you had a phone call with Maduro. Did you?
I don't want to comment on it. The answer is yes.
And can you tell us a little bit?
No, I can't do that.
The Venezuelan regime has deployed its military nationwide and continues to tout its ties to Russia and China.
In this year 2025, we are ready and willing to respond to any aggression against the people of Venezuela, and the Bolivarian military aviation knows that it has to strike hard wherever it has to strike.
The government of the United States is pressuring other countries because they believe they can isolate Venezuela. They pressure other countries so that airlines stop coming to our country. It is a very important step forward that we can have an increase in the flights between Russia and Venezuela.
Republican lawmakers have shown their support for the president's strikes on narco-terrorists in the region.
We have a war that's coming through fentanyl, through opioids, through cocaine. It killed 100,000 Americans last year. That's twice the number of people that died in 8 years of Vietnam, 4,000 Pennsylvanians. And when President Trump was running, he and I both campaigned on the same thing, which was secure the border, designate the cartels as narco-terrorists, and use our military.
No, he's made it very clear we're not going to put troops into Venezuela. What we're trying to do is protect our own shores.
Nicolás Maduro is an indicted narco-terrorist, and the Trump administration has made it clear it will not tolerate terrorist organizations proliferating in the region.
We are committed to taking out these narco-terrorists. President Trump is, Marco Rubio is, our entire administration.
It's important to know that President Trump has indicated that land strikes against foreign terrorist organizations in the region are imminent. These strikes would include parts of the Venezuelan military that are involved in drug trafficking as targets. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
President Trump said yesterday he had a phone call with Venezuela's leader, Nicolás Maduro. Joining us to discuss is Emel Khan, senior White House correspondent for the Epoch Times. So, Emel, good afternoon to you. So in addition to the phone call, President Trump said on Truth Social that the airspace around Venezuela should be considered closed. Maybe we can just start with that. Why do you think Trump is doing this?
Don, good to see you. Yes, President Trump is doing this because he wants to put pressure on Maduro. He wants the easy way. He said it clearly a few days ago that he chooses the easy way, which is basically he doesn't say it directly, but he wants Maduro to resign and leave the country peacefully, because this will decrease the threat coming from Venezuela. According to Trump, Venezuela poses one of the largest national security threats because of the drug trafficking and its huge role in drug trafficking. It's like a corridor, it's like a hub, logistics hub. And so he wants to end this business, drug trafficking business. He wants to end narco-traffic terrorist organizations. And he sees Maduro as a threat, as the head of these narco-terrorists. And he wants his regime to collapse, but he doesn't say it directly. But he, according to some reports, we've heard that he asked Maduro to resign. And that's why he is putting pressure, and it's very visible.
So that's a very important point you just raised. I'd like to follow up on that because you wrote an article for the Epoch Times about U.S. actions on Venezuela. You said the military buildup in the region and talks of possible U.S. land strikes in Venezuela have raised questions about whether Trump is seeking regime change. And you just mentioned that. Can you go a bit deeper into what Trump's goals here are?
Yes, if you ask the president himself or if you ask his administration, they will never say that they want Maduro regime to collapse. But what they are really focusing on, and that's the truth that they have been telling for months, is that they want to stop the threat coming from Venezuela. And they are focusing on that. But many people here would explain, and Washington experts will tell you that if Trump's strikes happen, the land actions happen in Venezuela, the regime will eventually collapse. So they don't see any relationship between like having drug cartel business collapsing, but Maduro regime staying. So they do see that eventually there will be chains of events that will lead to his collapse. But what Trump is trying to say, and he said it indirectly, he didn't say it directly, that I want the easy way. And we believe that the easy way is basically asking him to resign, and he's not doing. So far, he hasn't shown any interest in doing it. But we're going to be seeing something in the next 48 hours because, as we heard at the White House today, the president will be meeting with his national security advisors. He will be meeting with the defense secretary as well as Marco Rubio, his secretary of state, and they will speak about the next steps with respect to Venezuela.
Are there any scenarios, or what would they be, that could trigger U.S. land strikes inside Venezuela?
At the moment, President made it very clear that it could start very soon. He said land actions on inland and against these drug trafficking, drug cartels will be very soon. And he said it last week. So he is waiting for Maduro to resign. I think that's his tactic at the moment, and he wants to see the regime to collapse, or internally by military itself to put an end to the regime. So he wants either the military or Maduro to take action here. And that's why you see a lot of news about whether Trump will do something, whether U.S. is going to attack, or whether it's going to be imminent. These are all putting pressure on the regime itself. And now we know that Venezuela doesn't have a significant military power to respond to the U.S. Action. They also have economic collapse. This is a country that has the largest proven oil reserves in the world. But it cannot produce anything because of the regime's mismanagement over the years. And I would also add that this is one of the best examples of a socialist regime, how socialist regime can actually put its population in danger, because at the moment, people are not making any money. They are living in poverty. There's a huge humanitarian crisis, and it hasn't been very useful for the population itself. And I just heard that with the devaluation just recently that happened in the country had led to many people suffer, because now people are making $1 a month salary, $1 a month. And so it is going to collapse because this population does not want the regime. That's what we are hearing from insiders in Venezuela.
Okay, Emel, let me just ask you one last question here. How does China and Russia fit into the picture? Are they pieces of the puzzle as well or not?
They used to be, because Russia and China have significant interests in Venezuela, and they want the regime to stay. But at the moment, they don't have enough power to respond to American action. When it comes to China, they don't have significant military presence. They have huge economic interest. So China would unlikely to respond to or help Maduro. And in Russia at the moment, as we know, is in the midst of negotiating a peace deal and is in touch with the United States, so they don't want to derail this. And it's also has a lot of focus on Ukraine at the moment. So we do not expect Russia to be involved in this as well. And I also hear that Cuba might have difficulty as well. Cuba at the moment is also facing a lot of blackouts. They have issues with energy, as well as in Venezuela. You see a lot of people suffering because of blackouts. They don't have electricity for hours during the day. And if the regime collapses in Venezuela, if something happens soon, I think it will also have an impact on Cuba. That's what we're hearing as well.
Okay, Emel, great information today. Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you. Good to see you, Don.
Yeah. During the press briefing, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt read out President Trump's MRI results from October. This comes amid media attention on the president's health.
President Trump's cardiovascular imaging was perfectly normal. No evidence of arterial narrowing impairing blood flow or abnormalities in the heart or major vessels. The heart chambers are normal in size, the vessel walls appear smooth and healthy, and there are no signs of inflammation or clotting. Overall, his cardiovascular system shows excellent health. His abdominal imaging is also perfectly normal. All major organs appear very healthy and well perfused.
Leavitt said everything evaluated in the MRI scan is functioning within normal limits with no acute or chronic concerns. She added the report confirms that Trump remains in excellent overall health. The press secretary then criticized certain media outlets for questioning Trump's fitness for the job that defended then-President Biden's health. The White House is officially decked out for Christmas. First Lady Melania Trump personally selected this year's theme, which is "Home is where the heart is." It's the First Lady's 5th year shaping the holiday look at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. She says the decor celebrates American generosity, patriotism, and gratitude. Here's more.
This year's display includes over 50 Christmas trees, Melania Trump's signature wreaths with red bows outside the windows, and the official White House Christmas tree, an 18-foot fir in the Blue Room. In the East Room, the patriotic decor honors America's upcoming 250th anniversary. The Green Room focuses on family fun with games and Lego portraits. The Red Room highlights her Fostering the Future initiative, decorated with thousands of butterflies. And in the Blue Room, this year's theme honors Gold Star families. Blue, gold, and ivory decor and custom 3D printed ornaments show every state's bird and flower, and gold stars symbolize sacrifice. And in the state dining room, a massive gingerbread house features the South Portico, built from more than 100 pounds of gingerbread dough. Public Christmas tours begin tomorrow.
Holiday shopping is officially underway, and for many communities, those gift purchases are a lifeline for local jobs and downtown businesses. Retail experts say this year's season is starting earlier and lasting longer, with shoppers looking for gifts that feel meaningful, not just discounted. Director of the Center for Retailing Innovation at Texas A&M University, Thomas McMillan, says experience gifts are surging, from concert tickets to weekend getaways, as families look to share memories instead of stacking up on stocking stuffers. He says when people do buy physical presents, they're leaning toward quality over quantity: tech, premium cookware, leather goods, and other durable items. Self-care continues to boom as well, with wellness tech, massagers, and beauty devices among the categories expected to stand out this year. And analysts say high-income shoppers will drive much of the season's momentum. Economists say every purchase helps support workers and businesses. Meanwhile, the White House says strong Thanksgiving and Black Friday spending signals the U.S. economy is on track for stronger growth in 2026. The White House told CBS Sunday there was a 10% jump in online sales on Black Friday. Economic advisor Kevin Hassett pointed to rising incomes and pent-up demand after the government shutdown. President Trump said the United States could eliminate income taxes over the next couple of years due to tariff revenue. Joining us to discuss is Daniel Lacalle, chief economist at Tressis, international financial analyst and author of the book Freedom or Equality. So Daniel, good to see you. What is your view on the likelihood and feasibility as well of tariff revenue completely replacing income taxes?
Hi, Don. Well, obviously, completely replacing income taxes, very difficult. Income tax receipts go up to $2.4 trillion. The latest figures that we have from tariffs account for revenues of about $24 billion a month. So that would be a little bit more than $300 billion in a year if everything remains the same. I think that what President Trump is trying to convey is the following, is that there could be a substantial reduction of income taxes, particularly for the lower end of the income tax bracket, that could even end up eliminating the income tax for the lower range. But eliminating entirely the income tax seems very, very difficult, certainly from a revenue standpoint. There is another way of doing it, obviously, which is by reducing dramatically government spending. But we also must acknowledge that it's quite unlikely that any administration is able to reduce government spending by the equivalent of 2.4 trillion because it would include a very, very significant part, or actually almost more than half of mandatory spending. Therefore, I think that what President Trump is actually looking at is probably eliminating the lower end of the income tax bracket entirely. And that actually could be feasible.
Okay, so Daniel, whether we're talking about eliminating it completely or partially, I mean, in principle, the plan could stimulate economic growth, right, by reducing the tax burden on workers.
In any shape or form, any measure that we have discussed actually a couple of times, like, for example, reducing tax, even providing a check from the extraordinary revenues coming from tariffs, etc. Any of those measures are going to be positive for consumption, for economic growth, and for the improvement of the manufacturing and the services sector within the United States through domestic demand. Any of those measures will be positive. But we also have to acknowledge that the first thing that the United States needs to do is to rein in the enormous fiscal burden that has been inherited from the Biden administration, with a deficit that stands close to the 2 trillion figure. The first and foremost policy needs to be eliminating or certainly bringing that deficit to the lowest level possible.
Okay, Daniel, could you just address some concerns out there on this plan? For example, hypothetically speaking, if the U.S. were to impose $2.4 trillion of tariffs a year, what would be the impact on trade and the economy?
Well, certainly 2.4 trillion in tariffs is a phenomenal figure, and it looks almost impossible to achieve if you look at it from the figures of imports into the United States. But let's assume that it would happen. Let's assume $2.4 trillion of tariffs from abroad. It would definitely reduce international trade with the United States, absolutely, because let's assume that the entirety of those tariffs are absorbed by the producers abroad. Even if that were the case, it's going to make it very, very difficult for those producers to go to the U.S. market in the shape and form that we see it today. So, in essence, it would certainly have a very, very dramatic impact on international trade. It would certainly also create the desire from other governments of imposing very aggressive tariffs against the United States if it's as successful as to reach the levels of revenues that make it possible to eliminate such an incredibly receipt-heavy tax as the income tax. No, so I don't know. It's very, very, very challenging to think that something of this magnitude can happen. I think that the opportunities that are more feasible are in a reduction in taxes for the U.S. citizens, maybe even the possibility of a check if the revenues are exceptional. And certainly now that the waters of trade agreements have settled, and we know that next year there's going to be a significant level of growth in international trade, and there will be very, very low implications of these tariffs on inflation, then at least what we know right now is that there could be revenue positive and growth positive measures that may not entirely eliminate the income tax, but would certainly improve the domestic economy. At 2.4 trillion of tariff revenues seems to be in any shape and form almost impossible.
Okay, let's say we get a partial reduction in income taxes through tariffs. The question still remains, though, are tariffs a sustainable revenue source for a country?
Well, if it continues to be a growth economy that the rest of the world wants to sell to, absolutely they are. In fact, if you look at China, if you look at Brazil, if you look at the European Union, we talk a lot about tariffs in the United States, but we don't talk about the tariffs and non-tariff barriers that these economies continue to implement, and it seems that nobody is creating a big fuss about it all. So are they a measure that is leveling the playing field in trade, and that at the same time is strengthening international trade and improving the situation for United States companies with non-inflationary effects? Yes. Are they a magic wand that can generate perpetual revenues forever and increasing those revenues? Not necessarily. So I think that we need to be balanced. I think that the measures that have been implemented this year have proven to be positive for the economy. The economy is growing at a 4% annualized rate, according to the Atlanta Federal Reserve. They have not created inflationary pressures. The latest estimates from Bloomberg Economics show that inflation in the next month is going to be at the same level as it was in August and lower than in September and October last year. And at the same time, we are seeing that it's generating significant revenues and that the deficit is being reduced. Then there are a lot of positive elements. What we need to see is the effect in 2026 and 2027. If, as I expect, the deficit of the United States is going to drop down significantly in terms of GDP and also in absolute terms, and at the same time, we're going to get a stronger economic growth, more manufacturing, and a better service economy, all those elements then are likely to generate a positive outcome. And I think that that is undeniable right now.
Yeah, I mean, those are all positive outcomes. Daniel, maybe you can just address one more concern here. And that is, do you think announcing tariffs will fund U.S. government operations, sort of leave a bad taste in other countries' mouths? Because I believe you said before other countries pay for these tariffs. So would tariff-targeted nations think the U.S. is basically exporting its tax burden onto them?
It's a great question, but ultimately, if you think about it, that's what all governments do, don't they? When they are imposing CO2 taxes on U.S. companies, when they're imposing the different regulatory taxation and tariff and non-tariff barriers on U.S. companies, they are doing it and saying to their citizens in their countries that they're doing it to fund policies and programs in that country, no? So yes, absolutely, taxation and trade measures are all taken to try to improve the situation or to try to pay for programs in the country. But that is not only in the United States; it's also in other countries. What you're absolutely right is that there is a completely biased narrative all over the world in which it seems that the only country in the world that puts tariffs is the United States, which is false. And it seems that the only country in the world that wants to pay for an improvement in the conditions for their own citizens is the United States, when China, when the European Union, when India themselves are actually doing exactly that, using the trade, tariff, and taxation barriers to fund programs or supporting local industries.
Very good points there, Daniel. Thank you for speaking with us today.
Thank you very much, Don. Have a good day.
Major trade news today. The Trump administration says it has reached an agreement in principle with the UK on pharmaceutical pricing. The deal is part of the new US-UK economic prosperity deal announced by President Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Under the agreement, the UK will reverse years of declining National Health Service spending on innovative medicines. It will raise the net price it pays for new drugs by 25%. Britain also committed to limiting rebate demands. In return, the US will exempt UK-made pharmaceuticals, ingredients, and medical technology from Section 232 tariffs. It will also avoid launching tariff investigations tied to UK pricing practices during Trump's term. Officials say the agreement is designed to correct long-standing trade imbalances and strengthen investment and as well drug innovation in both countries. Expanding peace in the Middle East. That was one topic discussed between Israel's Prime Minister and President Trump. On X, Benjamin Netanyahu's office confirmed that the two leaders chatted. The Post said they talked about disarming Hamas and demilitarizing the Gaza Strip. They also talked about expanding peace agreements. The chat came a day after President Trump wrote on Truth Social, quote, "It is very important that Israel maintains a long and strong and true dialogue with Syria, that nothing takes place that will interfere with Syria's evolution into a prosperous state." Netanyahu's office noted that during their talk, President Trump invited the Prime Minister to meet at the White House in the near future. A critical round of diplomacy over the weekend, with U.S. and Ukrainian officials pushing for a framework to end the war. President Trump says progress is being made.
They're going along, and they're going along well. We want to stop people from being killed. Doesn't have much to do with us, but I'd like to see if we could save a lot of souls.
Do you want, to tell Putin, here is my deadline for you to...
No, I don't have a deadline. I have a deadline when the war is over. And hopefully the war is going to be over. 27,000 people killed last week. 27,000 over the last 3 or 4 weeks. 27,000 people killed. That war should end.
The U.S.-Ukraine talks unfolded yesterday at a private club near Miami. Ukraine entered the meeting facing intensifying pressure at home, including a major corruption probe and widespread power outages from Russian strikes. The talks also came as Russian forces continued to push along the front lines. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters yesterday the session with the Ukrainian team was productive, but work remains in the search for a peace deal. Rubio says the U.S. has to bring Russia on board and find a middle ground between Moscow's goals and Kyiv's goals. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff is traveling to Russia today, scheduled to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. President Trump says progress is being made, but adds that there's no deadline to make peace. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazar has the latest.
Last month, we had 27,000 people killed in that ridiculous war that should have never happened. It would have never happened.
President Trump aboard Air Force One on Sunday, saying peace talks between Russia and Ukraine are making progress. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says some tough issues still have to be resolved in the peace process, but he didn't specify what those issues are. Trump, meanwhile, says that Ukraine has domestic issues, calling ongoing corruption investigations, quote, difficult little problems. Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff is in Moscow on Monday to brief the Kremlin. He's set to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday.
To tell Putin, here is my deadline for you to...
No, I don't have a deadline. I have a deadline when the war is over. And hopefully the war is going to be over.
Russia confirms that Putin is set to meet with Witkoff on Tuesday, but a spokesman for the Kremlin suggesting the talks will be held behind closed doors.
For the success of the process, we are not going to hold talks in the megaphone regime. We are not going to hold any discussions via media.
The spokesman declined to say which issues Putin and Witkoff are set to discuss. Arian Pazar, NTD News.
The death toll from Hong Kong's deadliest fire in decades has climbed to at least 151. Investigators continue to probe into how the blaze spread so rapidly. Here's more.
The latest information from authorities points to substandard renovation materials. More than 40 people are still missing as police continue to sweep the 7 towers of Wong Fu Court. Mourners lined up yesterday for nearly a mile to lay white flowers and notes of grief outside the burned-out complex. The fire has sparked tension after police briefly detained a student who circulated flyers demanding an independent investigation and greater oversight. Hong Kong's South China Morning Post says 2 others have also since been arrested on suspicion of seditious intent. The Chinese regime has increasingly suppressed Hong Kong's freedoms in recent years. The Chinese Communist Party's National Security Office warned individuals over reigniting what they call political chaos, referring to large-scale pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong in 2019. Such protests have been a distant memory since Beijing imposed a national security law on Hong Kong in 2020.
Lawmakers are returning to Washington, D.C. this week. The House is teeing up a vote meant to discourage U.S. schools from taking grants from the Chinese Communist Party. In many cases, these grants are used to ingrain the Communist Party's ideology into the minds of young students. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports.
House lawmakers are working to prevent young students from being influenced by the Chinese Communist Party. The Education Committee reported earlier this year that Confucius classrooms have infiltrated more than 500 American K-12 schools.
The CCP Confucius classrooms pose a national security risk, a geopolitical security risk, and an academic security risk. To combat these threats,
the chairman described Confucius classrooms as CCP propaganda outposts. Many lawmakers have raised concerns that these types of classrooms are disguised as cultural exchange, but that the Chinese Communist Party has other goals.
The CCP doesn't do these things with a charitable intent. The entire purpose of the programs is they expect something in return, control over curriculum, and thereby influence over the young minds that are subject to it.
Congressman Kiley's bill called Protect Our Kids would allow the government to withhold tax dollars from elementary through high schools that have financial support from China. It will be voted on this week.
It is unacceptable that American school districts have entered into financial agreements with entities tied to the CCP, an adversary of the United States, a regime with one of the worst human rights records in modern history.
Lawmakers recently passed legislation to tackle the issue at the college level. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
No respite for some of the areas still recovering from a disruptive post-Thanksgiving storm. A new winter storm is racing out of the plains toward the northeast. Forecasters warn the system will spread snow, ice, and heavy rain from the central plains into the Midwest and interior Northwest today. The National Weather Service says the storm will bring hazardous snow and ice to the mid-Atlantic and Northeast as the first big winter storm of the season moves in. In New York, Lewis County is under a winter weather advisory, with up to 8 inches of snow expected. Travelers has been urged to use caution as snow-covered roads and restricted visibility are likely. And after the snow and ice, a surge of Arctic air will settle in, dropping temperatures to their lowest levels of the season in parts of the central and eastern U.S. The TSA says it screened over 3.1 million travelers yesterday, an all-time record. The agency said its top 10 busiest days all surged past 3 million. Meanwhile, the TSA said it was introducing a $45 fee option for travelers without real ID. Starting February 1st, travelers will be able to use an alternative identity verification system called TSA Confirm ID. According to the TSA, more than 94% of passengers already use their real ID or other acceptable forms of identification. The TSA is urging travelers without real ID to pay the fee online before traveling. The agency said it expects increased wait times for travelers who do not provide acceptable identification. How is President Trump's health? The White House reads out his MRI report from October. More news after this break. Safety while running is something many women have concerns with, but it's a problem that tends to get overlooked and incidents are often not called to be investigated. NTD Sean Marshall spoke with a woman who started a clothing brand so women can feel safer while running.
Studies show that a concerning number of women feel unsafe while running. A 2023 Adidas study found it to be 92%.
I've had, like so many other women, catcalls, cars honking. A lot of women just want to run in peace.
Those numbers motivated Faith Chima and the FitSafe clothing brand to make a difference in combining fitness and safety together. FitSafe is also running their own survey to get more up-to-date data.
So it started out as a personal frustration of mine because I could only run very early in the mornings as a mom of 3 and busy attorney. And I was always worrying about my safety. So I started to dig into the research because I was looking for an activewear that would enhance my safety and something that was also functional and stylish.
During the New York Marathon Runners Expo, a table caught my attention because it had safety gear on it. I then realized women's safety while running was something I never even thought about.
Yes, so there is limited data on what women have experienced while running. A lot of women, several of my customers have come up to me to say that they really resonate with our mission because they have been followed on many occasions. Some of them have been harassed. The data shows that 68% of women have been attacked.
Chima says many of these cases go unreported because the women are either not believed, taken seriously, or don't want to relive the experience.
So we are solving this problem by designing intelligent clothing. We believe that wearing intelligent clothing can make a difference, and so all of our pieces are made with functional pockets that can be used to store your phone, your safety essentials. Studies have shown that one of the best tools to carry on around to keep you safe is your phone. And so we have crop bras that are designed with front zippered pockets, so that way you have your phone right in front of you and you have quick access to what you need to keep yourself safe.
Chima believes there should be more conversations about running safety and that men should be invited into the conversations, as men are not having the same experiences and could be on the lookout and educated on how to notice when something strange is going on. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
Picture this, the heart of Manhattan, full of energy, movement, and life. Now imagine bringing that same vitality into your home with trusted health insights for your body, mind, and soul. Every week, Vital Signs dives into health issues that matter the most. The foods that strengthen your immune system, the exercises that keep you moving, the mindfulness practices that calm your mind, plus expert advice from doctors and health leaders you can trust. This isn't just another health show. It's real insight designed to keep you informed, inspired, and in motion. So whether you're starting your day with focus or winding down with balance, Vital Signs brings health and vitality straight into your living room.